Magical. Thank you, everybody, for coming to the Resilient Landscapes Coalition workshop. I'm so glad you're here. My name is Thomas Hare. I work with the Water Use Efficiency section for the City of Santa Rosa. And I'm delighted to be able to host these wonderful people around me on the screen, who are the ones that actually know the things that you are here to find out. So thank you for coming. And I cannot resist the opportunity to tell you just a little bit about the Water Use Efficiency section. So I'm just going to share my screen. And this technology always goes very smoothly for me. So somebody will let me know if this does not work well.
That looks great, Thomas.
Good.
Fantastic. So it is the 30th of March, 2021, surprise. And we are here to learn about resilient landscapes. We are going to be asking you just to put where you're from in the chat right now. We're going to be disabling the chat soon, but just so we can find out who's here, just go ahead and throw that in the chat. As soon as you're done doing that, we are going to disable the chat, and we're also not using the raise hand feature. We will have the Q&A feature that we'll be using. So please put questions in the Q&A, and we'll be answering a lot of those by text during it, but we'll pull out a few of them later. So that is going to be the place to go. There is also going to be a chance to upvote the questions in the Q&A. And so if you see a question that you would really like to make sure that we address, please go ahead and upvote that. This meeting is being recorded. It will be available within a week, along with a PDF of all of the slides. As Mimi mentioned, there will be a lot of information tonight, and so you don't need to frantically try to write everything down, because you can just listen, and this will be available later. So the other thing is that there is a live transcript available. If you don't want to see the live transcript, click on the live transcript, the CC icon on your the bottom of your screen, and go to hide subtitle. Okay. The reason that I am here is because we don't have an unlimited supply of water, shockingly. And the thing to notice here, you don't need to look at all of the lines, but the amount of water in Lake Sonoma, we're the black line at the bottom right now, and that is not a good place to be. You see all those other colorful lines, those are on top of the black line. That means that at times in the past, we had more water. And since a picture is worth 1,000 graphs, this is Lake Mendocino as of March 17th. Normally in a lake, you would expect there to be water. Unfortunately, there is not an abundance of water at the moment in Lake Mendocino, and according to the Ukiah Daily Journal on March 17th, another year of drought in Mendocino County. So that is the kind of context of water use efficiency, why I'm here. So we've had a water use efficiency program for the city of Santa Rosa since the 70s. And because of all of the work of the people in the city of Santa Rosa, saving 1.5 billion gallons per year, removed more than 3.5 million square feet of lawn. We offer outdoor water checkups to anybody in the city of Santa Rosa. We can help you figure out how to save water for your irrigation. We also have irrigation recommendations on our website at WaterSmartYard. You can go to srcity.org/watersmartyard. We also have a green exchange rebate. So if you're thinking about taking out your lawn and putting in the kind of landscape that the folks will be talking about tonight, we can help give you some money to offset some of that cost. So please contact us if you would like to be pre-qualified for that program. And we have our website here as srcity.org/watersmart, or you can reach us at 543-3985. And we have a lot of information on our website about rebates and incentives and Water Smart Yard, which is the recommendations, and then recommendations for your home as well. So I'm going to stop sharing my screen. Okay, I'm back. I'm a human. Hello. So again, I'm just delighted to have the people here with me tonight. I'm going to turn it over to Paul Lowenthal, and then I'll introduce the panel. Paul, please tell us who you are and why you're here.
Hello, everybody. My name is Paul Lowenthal, Assistant Fire Marshal with the Santa Rosa Fire Department. As Thomas said, welcome, not only on behalf of the Water Department, but on behalf of the Santa Rosa Fire Department and the City of Santa Rosa. These opportunities are always exciting for us to have these partnerships, to have people not just from Santa Rosa, but from all across Sonoma County helping kind of work on this joint effort. Ultimately, we all have one goal: to make our community safer. Right now, my responsibility for the City of Santa Rosa is to implement our new vegetation management program and community wildfire protection plan. So looking forward to being here with you for all the great resources that we have here tonight. And I'll be here to help answer questions at the end of the presentation. Thank you.
Great. Thank you so much, Paul. I'm so glad you can be with us tonight. Thank you. So again, it's all really important, right? The fires, of course, have just devastated our community since 2017. And then we also have all of these other considerations now that we're trying to fit all the pieces together. And so I am just so grateful to the people on this call because they have done the work of trying to marry those things together, because it's really complicated. You're gonna have a lot of information tonight coming your way. And I just, again, just very, very grateful for these people. So we've got Ellie Inslee from the Sonoma Ecology Center, got Mimi Enright from the UC Master Gardener Program of Sonoma County, April Owens from the Habitat Corridor Project and the Native Plant Society, and Roberta McIntyre should be here, yes, with Fire Safe Sonoma. Thanks. And so what I'm going to do is I'm going to hand it over to Ellie to start us off, and she's going to tell you a little bit about this Resilient Landscapes coalition and how it came to be and what they are, and kind of set the stage for everything else. So Ellie, over to you.
Great. Okay. Sharing my screen, getting everything set up. Thumbs up if you see that. Yeah, good. Okay. So, and yeah, thanks very much, Paul and Thomas. That's a great introduction, and it kind of sets the stage for this, amazing. And it's been a little like, getting a master's or a PhD in the last 4 years that I've been working on this. I'm a landscape architect, and I've specialized in natural habitat restoration. And I am on the board of the Sonoma Ecology Center. So I got started on this, and first let me introduce this, the resilient, Firewise and resilient landscaping, garden as if life depends on it. And we have that subtitle because it's obviously we want to create defensible space in our gardens that protect us, protect our homes, create a landscape so the firefighters can protect our homes and also be safe themselves. But so it's the human lives, but it's also the lives of the wildlife and the other animals that are in our gardens. And a lot of times we don't think about that. So that's something that we want to bring to you in this presentation. So we'll be talking about defensible space that's beautiful, sustainable, and biodiverse. And I'd like to start with this picture because it shows a plant called heuchera, also known as coral bells. And it's a really beautiful native plant that is kind of like the poster child for a lot of the plants that would really work well in your garden. It's kind of herbaceous so that it doesn't have a lot of woody stuff that burns. It has beautiful flowers. It's gorgeous, aesthetically beautiful. And it also provides food and shelter for wildlife. And so it's a really good example of what we're trying to achieve with our presentation. So just really briefly about the Sonoma Ecology Center. Our mission is to work with our community to identify and lead actions that achieve and sustain ecological health in Sonoma. And we have our fingers in a lot of pies, but this one became really important to me after the Tubbs and the Nuns fire in 2017, because I have a home in Glen Ellen, and almost all my neighbors burned down. And the only reason my house didn't burn down is well, I won't go into that, but so we started to lead walks into the wildlands to show people that the landscape can be resilient, to try to raise a certain, quality of hope, because everybody was so devastated. And in the process of leading those walks, we learned that a lot of people were confused about what to do with their own landscape. So we started to get together. Mimi from the Habitat Corridor Project, April from the Habitat Corridor Project, and Mimi and I got together to try to create some, some slides and some designs that would help people. And then we realized that we needed to actually bring in the fire professionals so that we wouldn't encourage you to do things and then have them come and tell you to tear it out. So our team, as you've heard a couple of times now, I'm with the Sonoma Ecology Center. Mimi is the program manager of the Master Gardener program. And April Owens is executive director of the Habitat Corridor Project and has her own design business. So, and then we have Roberta McIntyre from Fire Safe Sonoma. And sorry, Roberta, I didn't get your URL in there, but I think we're going to have it in a Google Doc that we send out later. And then the Resilient Landscapes Coalition has its own website, which is very much in its toddlerhood, but it has a lot of really good information in it. And that's SonomaResilientLandscapes.com. We're all volunteers. We've been trying to get grants, and all of the content you see here is basically presented on a volunteer basis. So I'm going to give the overview, and I'm going to really briefly, one slide on regulations, a little bit about the wildland urban interface, a little background, and then I'll want to talk about ecology and sustainability in the garden. And then Mimi's going to talk about design and maintenance principles. And then April is going to talk about specifics of landscape design and planting examples. So really briefly, regulations. It's the landowner's responsibility to be familiar with state and county regulations. A lot of times we've given this presentation in the county, so we're kind of familiar with, as far as defensible space goes, the State Public Resources Code 4291, which is actually the template for what most of the local ordinances and codes use. So I think we have that in our the document, the PDF document we'll send you later, so that you can access that. Sonoma County has its own ordinance, Chapter 13A. And then I know the city of Santa Rosa is developing its own. So Paul can talk to you a little bit more about that later. And then if you're in a very high hazard zone, fire hazard zone, there are some additional restrictions. And then also, if you live along the stream, a creek, or in a wildland area, it's really important to know about regulations within sensitive habitats. And there are county regulations, state and federal regulations. So that was my brief overview. If anybody has any questions, it's best probably just to refer to our PDF, or maybe Paul can help with that later. So little background on the wildland urban interface. It's defined as an area where homes and associated structures are built among or adjacent to forests, shrubs, or grasslands. In other words, the sort of undeveloped landscape. And as a result of climate change and fire suppression over the last couple 100 years, plus increased development in the wildland, there is increased fire risk quite naturally. There'll be more wildfires sparked because of human ignitions, usually unintentional. And wildfires that occur will pose a greater risk to lives and homes because there's a lot more people there. And that's why we have to evacuate when there's a fire. But it's harder to fight the fire for the same reason. And Paul will tell you stories of having to jump over people's fences and open gates and get to their fire hoses, because sometimes their fences and their landscapes become wicks for that fire. And it's also hard to let natural fires burn in the wildland urban interface. You can't, because the houses will burn too. So there's an increased potential for catastrophic fire. And then with that, you get loss of homes and lives and all of the attendant emotional and economic issues that happen. But you also get increased air and water pollution. And then you have to take all the rubble from the houses and then use resources to put the houses back. So just from an ecological standpoint, what we're telling you about creating defensible space is really, really important. And that's something from Caroleon Safford. I thought that was a really good point that she made. Okay, so those of you who are map nerds like me, you will enjoy and be horrified by this map. It shows, I'm going to turn my pointer on. So this is Highway 101. Here's Santa Rosa. And you can see, you know, basically the ring of fire around the city of Santa Rosa. This is the Tubbs fire footprint. Here's the Glass fire all the way into Napa County, the Nuns fire down in my community of Glen Ellen and Sonoma, and then the Wallbridge fire over here. So this is just in the last 3 years, and that's no mystery to everybody, but it kind of helps sometimes to see the you know, the intensity of it. And this map is also interesting because it shows you all the different vegetation coverage. So if you think back to that one, and I showed you the Tubbs fire outline here, this map is really interesting because it shows the difference in development, human development, between 1964, when the Handley fire was in pretty much the same location, and the 2017 Tubbs fire. And the thing that's really fascinating, this is Highway 101, here's Healdsburg up here in Santa Rosa. You can see that the high density housing has increased, but the yellow, which is the low density housing, has moved into the fire footprint. And so not only are we moving into the wildland areas and endangering ourselves, but we're also moving into habitat where wildlife has been, you know, in place for a lot of time. So one of the points that I want to propose and you know, talk to you guys about is this idea that yes, we need to take care of ourselves and our neighbors, and including all of our neighbors. So there's the wildlife that whose landscape we moved into. You know, the mammals and the insects and the birds, and a wonderful entomologist or insect specialist, scientist has made a really good point. This is Douglas Tallamy. He wrote the book, Bringing Nature Home. And he made this statement, and I highly recommend it to everybody, Bringing Nature Home, Doug Tallamy. He talks all about gardens and the ways that we can actually take care of wildlife. He says, for the first time in history, gardeners have become important players in the management of our nation's wildlife. And he makes the point that our gardens can support ecosystem services. And I'm going to tell you a little bit about those. So our gardens can provide shade, which acts as air conditioning, which cuts down on your electric bill. Aesthetics, obviously, we want our gardens to be beautiful. So we don't want to create moonscapes in order to make in order to feel safe for fire. And we don't have to. Our garden can enrich soil and hold it in place, which is critical for reasons you'll see a little bit later on. Our gardens can clean and manage water. The vegetation actually filters the water and slows it down, spreads it out, gets it to sink into the ground, and that way it can be stored. And it's, you know, you're not letting it run off as much. It's, for various reasons, really helpful. And then our gardens can sequester carbon and support birds and other pollinators. In other words, supporting biodiversity. So on the subject of supporting biodiversity, it's defined as the web of life above and below ground. And that web of life is declining alarmingly. An iconic example is the monarch butterfly, which when I gave this presentation a year ago, I could say that it's at 97% of its 1980 levels. Now, I mean, below, so it's, in other words, 3%, but now we're at like 0.1% of the populations of monarchs, the Western monarchs that we had in 1980. And so actually the Western monarchs are on the brink of extinction, and it's just fallen off a cliff lately. And so that's just one example of an insect that's in decline. But in 1917, a German study reported a decline of more than 75% of insect biomass. That's like if you took all the insects and put them in a ball, you know, how big would that ball be, as opposed to the different species diversity. A 75% drop in insect biomass in parks, in natural preserves in Germany. And these same studies have been showing up all around the world. So the reason it's important is, at least for us humans, is that at least a third of our food crops are pollinated by insects. So it's really critical, and we can actually help in our gardens. So the things that we can do, and April will talk a lot more about this, choose native species, at least 70 to 80%. And the reason is that insects and birds and other wildlife have actually co-evolved with the plants that grew up in the neighborhood. So one example is the monarch butterfly. In this picture here is a narrow-leaved milkweed, which is the milkweed we recommend in our neighborhood. That's really good for the monarchs. There's some tropical milkweeds that are gorgeous, but they're actually really detrimental to the monarchs. And they can be really beautiful in your garden. So the more milkweed we can plant, but the milkweed is just one example of a kind of iconic species. There are a lot of other insects and wildlife that are dependent on locally native species. And natives are also much more drought tolerant. Plant islands for bird and butterfly food and shelter. So clustering the plants is really good so that the insects and birds can actually see the food. Use integrated pest management. Obviously, if you're using an insecticide, you're not doing a really good thing for the bugs. And provide a water source. That's really good for all wildlife. A few more points on biodiversity. It's really important to keep all plants healthy. If the insects and other wildlife are going to be eating, like if you've got caterpillars on a plant, you want the plant to be healthy so it can actually withstand the caterpillars. But you also want those caterpillars to feed birds. The birds use pretty much caterpillars and insects and actually entirely to feed their young. So you want to keep plants healthy because a healthy plant is also more fire resistant. A healthy plant is not going to be having a lot of dead and dying branches, and you're going to have a lot less maintenance. Point on oak trees, they have the highest food productivity. That little, oh, you know what? I really want, did anybody notice the monarch butterfly caterpillar in the last picture? I'm hiding these little insects and caterpillars in the pictures. I'm not going to go back, but this is an oak moth caterpillar, and if you stop and actually watch birds when they're feeding their young, they're feeding them caterpillars. They're just really high in protein and fat. And then leaf litter is really important. And when you're in certain zones, it's totally okay to leave that leaf litter under the oaks and other plants because it supports insects. There's a lot going on in that leaf litter. If you notice, towhees and other birds scrounge around and look for things to eat. And then microorganisms feed the roots, that the leaf litter feeds the microorganisms that feed the roots. So the timing of vegetation management is really important because birds are nesting from March through August. So the best time to trim and prune is September to February. So if you're needing to go out and prune right now, be super careful. A lot of birds like this junco actually nest on the ground, and you got to be really careful that you're not disturbing them. One other point supporting biodiversity is we want to minimize light pollution. And so if you want to have uplights into your trees, everybody loves that. It's really important to have them on timers because there are a lot of nocturnal insects. We don't really know how many, but some people think like 50% of insects are nocturnal, and they have trouble finding their mates or food when the lights are so strong. And here's one of those insects I told you would be hiding. This is actually a native California firefly. And that light in its abdomen, actually it's the female, attracts the male. And how's he going to find her if she's somewhere in here? So that's my plug for minimize lighting pollution. And supporting sustainability, plants and mulch hold soil in place. They encourage the water to slow down and infiltrate, and they protect water quality in the streams for fish. So also in supporting sustainability, we want to avoid over clearing because not only will you have a lot of runoff, soil running off into the streams, but having bare dirt like this will encourage highly flammable invasive species like grasses and broom to come into the landscape. So I very sneakily snuck this picture overlapped showing broom that would encroach on this landscape quite easily because it's been over cleared. And then a point about sequestering carbon. the more we have, the more our soil is healthy with the mulch and the oak leaf litter and various things like that, the better we will be able to sequester carbon and retain moisture to make a healthier, more fire resilient landscape. And that's the end of my part. I have the native, the bird, what is it, the state bird of California here, because quail also nest on the ground. And a lot of people don't realize this. Many, many, many birds nest on the ground or within the first 3 or 4 feet. So what we can do in our landscape really supports all of these wonderful critters. Thank you.
Great. Thank you, Ellie. Okay. The moment of truth, the scary moment for every presenter. Whether the screen
Take it away,
shares,
Mimi. Sorry, I left that part out.
whether the screen share is going to work right. So are you guys seeing my slide without speaker's notes? Woohoo! I finally cracked the code, you guys. I've struggled with that workshop after workshop. I think I finally got it down. So welcome everybody. Really exciting to see the wide array of areas that you all reside in. Really grateful for you taking the time out of your lives to come listen to our presentation. So my name is Mimi Enright. I'm the program manager for the UC Master Gardener program here in San Francisco in Sonoma County. And hopefully many of you are already familiar with who we are and what we do. We are trained agents of the University of California, and our mission is to extend educational outreach of the university to our community. And we do that with a focus on sustainable landscape principles as our core message. So after the 2017 fires, our program spent a year, we brought a team together, and the group spent a year doing a really deep dive into all the content that's out there on defensible space. And to be honest, it can be really overwhelming. And it was for us as we first started moving into the topic. So our goal was really to try to synthesize and simplify that content for our community moving ahead. And we actually consider this presentation as kind of version 2.0 of our Firewise educational outreach, because we really helped translate more specific recommendations for the different zones of defensible space around your home. And we're really proud of the partnership that we've developed with Sonoma Ecology Center and Habitat Corridor Project and Fire Safe Sonoma on this work. And I also want to extend a big thank you to Caroleon Stafford, formerly with the County of Sonoma Office of Fire and Emergency Services. Now that organization is part of Permit Sonoma, for her work with us over the last several years, as well as Roberta McIntyre from Fire Safe Sonoma, who've been really wonderful resources in sharing their time and knowledge. So Ellie did a really great job setting the framework for you of why sustainable landscape principles are so important. And our goal was really to try to marry those sustainable landscape principles with Firewise landscaping recommendations. And why is that so important? And well, as Ellie has so eloquently shared with us, our climate's changing, and so are our landscapes. And we really believe that each property can and should make a difference in supporting biodiversity and being prepared for future fires. So we're hoping to provide some clarity and simplicity for you on the volume of existing information on this topic. But I want to point out that this is not meant as prescriptive mandates. We're really just trying to provide guidelines for each individual for decision making on their own property, so each of us can be better prepared to make decisions as we move ahead. Okay, so I have a lot of territory to cover in a really short amount of time, and pun intended, it's going to be a bit of a fire hose of information at you. And know that we will include a PDF link to the slides from our presentations, all our presentations, so you've got those as a resource to refer back to. So I'm going to start off by doing just a quick, very brief touch on fire basics, then move into designing for fire and plant selection considerations, then a discussion on how to design your home landscape with fire in mind based on the different zones in the defensible space zone, which is the 0 to 100 foot zone around your home. A quick touch on the topic of mulch, and then ongoing maintenance, which is truly one of the most important aspects of continuing to keep our properties as ready as we can before the next fire. So let's dive on in. So as I said, I'm not going to spend a lot of time on the topic of fire and how it operates. Frankly, I really think of that as the bailiwick of our firefighting personnel. They're much more expert on that topic than I am. But I want to cover just a few basics which are important in the context of our conversation today. So very basically, fire must have three elements in order to burn, and that is fuel, oxygen, and heat. And fire behavior is influenced by the elements of fuel, weather, and topography. And very basically, fuel is anything that will burn, and that can be in your home landscapes. Vegetation, such as trees, woody shrubs, and perennials, landscape mulch, fencing, roof decks, lawn furniture, arbors, trellises, planter boxes, broom that's left out at the side of your home during a red flag warning day. All of those constitute fuel that can feed a fire that may be threatening your home. And which of these three elements can you control? The only one you can control is fuel. So we're trying to give you some information to help you do that. So there are three threats or exposures that a building can experience during a wildfire. That's from either direct flame to the structure, from radiant heat off of fire approaching the structure, and wind-borne embers. And as we're all unfortunately way too familiar with now in Sonoma County, embers under wildfire conditions can be persistent and really unpredictable. And they seem to have a way of finding a weakness in a home. In fact, most building ignitions have been attributed to embers. They can ignite building components and contents directly, or ignite vegetation and other combustible items adjacent to or near a building. And that can then result in radiant heat or direct flame contact exposure. For example, embers may land on and ignite debris that has accumulated in your gutter. And that burning debris then causes direct flame contact on the edge of the roof. Or embers may ignite nearby vegetation to the home, and that could result in radiant heat exposure to the side of a building, potentially igniting combustible siding or breaking the glass in a window. And then the opening from that broken glass would then allow the fire to enter the building and ignite combustible materials such as carpeting and furniture. So today, as I mentioned, we're focusing on the fuels in the 100-foot zone surrounding your home, which is what we call the defensible space zone. This concept was developed by the USDA Forest Service fire scientist Jack Cohen in the late 1990s, following some breakthrough experimental research into how homes ignite due to the effects of radiant heat. So since then, wildfire safety recommendations have really been shaped by this fire science. And because of it, we're able to provide much more actionable guidance for individuals to help them prepare their homes and home landscapes in the threat of fire. So it's really important to consider what your goals are in preparing for the next fire. And certainly we want to slow the fire and reduce the possibility of it catching your house on fire. But it's also important to consider that and ensure that there's an exit plan for you and your family. And it's just as important to ensure that there's appropriate access for firefighters coming to defend your home for their safety. So I assume most of you on this workshop with us today have been through at least the Glass Fire or the Kincaid Fire or the 2017 Fires Complex. We're getting way too much experience on this topic here in Sonoma County. But here's the bottom line. What you do to prepare your home and landscape for the next fire really matters. And we know what the truths are in this slide and in this presentation. Your actions to prepare for the next wildfire are really key. So we all know how hard our firefighters have worked to protect our homes and communities. And given the scope of the wildfires that we've seen, we also know that we can't assume that there's going to be a shiny red truck parked outside of your home when the fire comes. So attending this workshop is a great first step, but coming to the meeting isn't enough. You really need to, hopefully, we're really hoping you take away at least a few items, even little things, action items you can take that will help you and your homes and family and community and our firefighters hopefully be more safe in a future event. Okay, so your starting point is actually your house. And we're not going to go into the topic of home hardening today, as our focus is on the landscape surrounding your home and structures. But there are many really wonderful resources to help guide you through the home hardening process. But here are the different defensible space zones in your home landscape that we're going to be discussing today. So we're going to start with the zone and immediate perimeter around your house, which is the 0 to 5 foot zone. Then we're going to move out to the next zone, the intermediate zone, which is the 5 to 30 foot zone. And then we'll move out to the extended zone of 30 to 100 feet. So here are our very basic Firewise landscaping principles. And I really want to stress that resilient garden design is about plant selection and placement, your overall design of your defensible space, your space around your home, with both hardscape elements and also ongoing maintenance. And of course, we all hope that this is done with the lens of sustainability about retaining water in your property, conserving water and energy, supporting wildlife, and sequestering carbon. So many of those topics that Ellie just covered for us. So I also want to point out that there is not scientific research to support all of our recommendations. So I will point out through the presentation where recommendations are supported by science, by scientific research. And also as we go through today's presentation, any items that you're going to see highlighted in red represent County of Sonoma code requirements. And we have a City of Santa Rosa fire chief with us here today, which we're really grateful for him taking time out of his very busy schedule to join us for this workshop. So I will touch on, we met with him last week to make sure that there weren't any specific City of Santa Rosa code requirements we should point out. And there's one minor code requirement that I'll point out when we get to that section of the presentation. So very basically, you want to make sure that all plants in your landscape are selected and placed carefully, regularly maintained and hydrated. You want to design, because that maintenance component is so all important, you want to be able to design so you can get in to maintain those plants for ease of maintenance. Each home and landscape is unique and must be considered individually. Of course, you want to do what is required by law, so we're all safer moving ahead in the future. And where science-based information is available, use science to inform your decisions. Okay, so let's start with some basic concepts for what you can do to create a Firewise landscape. We recommend choosing fire-resistant landscape features such as inorganic mulch like gravel, permeable pavement, stone walls, ponds, dry creek beds, or boulders. You want to carefully select and place plants with spacing to disrupt fire. And ongoing maintenance is critical to keep your landscape healthy and prepared for the next fire event. Throughout the year, you need to remove any dead or dying shrubs, trees, or branches. And since that's in red, that is a County of Sonoma code requirement. You need to avoid planting close to structures, as embers landing in those plants can transmit fire to your home. And you want to prune all tree limbs 6 feet up from the ground or 1/3 the height of a smaller tree. So for example, if a tree is 12 feet high, you're going to want to limb it up 4 feet from the ground, and then you're going to want to continue to maintain that tree as it grows larger. So you also want to make sure you're making it easier for firefighters to find you. If you live in a neighborhood or an area that has multiple driveways off of one access road, you want to make sure you place a sign at the beginning of the road with all the numbers, and then place a sign at each driveway and on the house. And in fact, reflective street and address signs are a county code requirement. So there's a really compelling video from the Kincaid fire where firefighters are they were making that stand to try to save the town of Windsor. And they're trying to hold off the fire from moving into Windsor. And the video clip shows wood fences burning and moving fire to the homes. And you see firefighters literally ripping down gates or tossing firewood away from where it was positioned next to a front door. So for sure, you want to replace any wood fence or gate that attaches to your home. We've got some ideas of some creative options in some non-organic materials that can help provide you screening and protection. But you also want to make sure, like for example, on a red flag warning day, you want to make sure you're walking the perimeter of your house to look for things that could bring fire into your home. Embers could land in, like a stack of firewood next to your front door. And you don't want to make the firefighters have to take any time when they're trying to make a stand and fight off a fire to save your home, to have to throw that firewood away from the house perimeter. And there's a video where you can see logs that obviously the firefighters had thrown as they were fighting the fire. And you want to do everything you can in advance of a fire, especially on a red flag warning day, so they can be spending their precious time helping keep our homes safe. Okay, let's dive into plant selection considerations. I am as much guilty of this as I'm sure many of you are. I think many of us select plants because the flower is pretty. I'm telling you, I've selected many in my own way based on that. But there are really much broader considerations that we need to try to consider from a fire and an ecology perspective that we should be taking into account. So a poorly planted plant is stressed and will require more water, nutrients, and is more susceptible to predation, drought, and fire. So right plant, right place is really incredibly important in Firewise landscaping. So you want to choose plants. You really need to think about how large is this plant going to grow. And when you pick up that little 4-inch pot at the nursery, you really need to pay attention to what mature size that plant is going to grow into and where you're planning to put it in your landscape. So you want to be, wherever possible, locating plants where you don't have to keep pruning it to maintain its desired spacing. You also need to consider whether the plant will thrive where you're planning to plant it. Is it a plant that prefers shade and you're going to be putting it in full sun? And are you up for the maintenance that plant is going to require? And will it spread to a neighbor's property and create a possible fire threat? And also think about how a plant might change over its lifespan. So lavender is a really great example. It's a really popular landscape plant for many of us in wine country. It starts out as herbaceous or non-woody, but it becomes much more woody over time. So I have to say, after being really deeply enmeshed in this topic, I've really started to see a landscape through a different lens. And I think about how fire will move through the landscape and how much fuel that would add to a fire. How much woody mass is there, for example? How closely spaced are plants? Is there ladder fuel under a tree? Right? There's so many different ways that enmeshing yourself in this content brings you to start thinking about when you look at your landscape. So some of you may have come to today's session hoping that we're going to give you a list of fire-resistant plants for your garden. Here's the list. Go plant them and you're done. But nothing could be further from the truth. In the scientific community, there is a lack of consensus on what elements to test to confirm plant flammability. So given this, the University of California does not advocate the use of fire-resistant plant lists. That doesn't mean that you're not going to see a lot of them out there. That doesn't mean that there's a lot of demand to them. But really applied to plants, we feel that the term fire-resistant can be misleading. All plants will burn under the right conditions. This picture actually shows some succulents that burned in the Tubbs fire in Fountain Grove. So on hot and windy days, when the ground is dry and plants have little moisture in the stems and leaves, fire can race through almost any landscape, threatening homes and lives. So if there's any defense against fire in landscaping, it's more likely through the landscape design and maintenance rather than plant selection. Really feel like it's misleading for people to feel like they can pick plants from a list of fire-resistant plants and think that they're all set, because there's really a lot more involved to consider. So I want to point out that it's particularly important to keep dead leaves and branches from accumulating in the center of a plant, which will absolutely make it more flammable. Okay, so where shouldn't you plant? So we're going to spend some more time shortly on the 0 to 5 foot zone around your house. And that is recommended to be an ember-free zone, which means you have no organic materials in that zone. And I'll talk about that in just a minute. Scientific research does support making the ember-free zone. So it's a really important takeaway from our workshop today. Places that are also especially vulnerable to fire include under vents and eaves around in your home, in front of windows or combustible siding, under or near decks, and inside corners of your home. So those are all places where embers could fall into plant matter and introduce fire directly to your home. That's where you've got the highest risk. So hopefully you're all familiar with the concept of ladder fuels. The goal is to reduce the possibility of having fire move from the ground plane into shrubs and then into trees. So you want to avoid placing shrubs under trees. And if you do, you want to allow at least 3 times the height of the shrub between it and the lowest limb. And this is a really beautiful graphic drawn by Ellie to help depict this concept. So you want to limb up all your trees. I'm going to reiterate this a number of times. It's a really important aspect to do in our gardens. Limb up all your trees at least 6 feet from the ground, or 1/3 the height of the tree, and then continue to maintain it as it grows. So these are CAL FIRE recommendations for plant spacing guidelines within 100 feet of your home. I want to stress that this is not mandated by law. It's not based on scientific research, but it is based on best experience and perspective from our firefighting officials. So these guidelines are for horizontal and vertical spacing, and it's a function of flame height. That's the basis of why CAL FIRE makes the spacing recommendations that they do. And then the slope of the land around the home is a really major consideration in assessing wildfire risk. A fire will burn faster and more intensely uphill than along flat ground. So a steeper slope is going to result in a faster moving fire with longer flame lengths. So spacing between grasses, shrubs, and trees is crucial to reduce the spread of wildfires. And then that spacing needed is greater based on the slope of the land. So on flat to gently sloping terrain, individual shrubs or small clumps of shrubs should be separated from one another by at least twice the height of the average shrub. And you can see again in one of these great graphics that Ellie created for us, showing you on this less than 20% slope that you want to have 2 times the height of the shrubs bordering this, this separation, this gap we want to create between the shrub plantings of 2.5 times the height of those shrubs. So of course, for homes located on steeper slopes, that separation distance will be greater. So this graphic is just depicting shrub spacing, but we wanted to point out that low growing or well irrigated grasses, ground covers, or perennials are considered to be acceptable between these plant groupings. But again, each of us needs to assess the overall risk with degree of slope and fire risk to make appropriate decisions in our own home landscapes. So this graphic is depicting suggested horizontal as well as vertical separation of trees. Those ladder fuels that we were discussing earlier. So you can see on the right of each of these depictions of slope, Ellie's showing that you want to have 3 times the height of any shrub or plant under a tree, 3 times spacing of the height of that plant material. And that spacing on less than a 20% slope of 10 feet is recommended. And then of course on steeper slopes, that recommended distance is increased. So we want to really highlight that we don't have to denude our landscapes in the 100-foot perimeter around the home, but we do want to make sure that we have spacing to reduce the fuel volume and help break up the flow of fire to your home. So the previous slides showed CAL FIRE recommendations on tree and shrub spacing. Also wanted to share, this is a recommendation from the NFPA, or National Fire Protection Association. There are good arguments to justify both perspectives. I just wanted to give you another perspective from firefighting officials on tree spacing to consider based on the distance from your home. They're all best recommendations, again, to support improving your home's fire safety. And again, you want to consider your own property's specific aspects to make appropriate decisions to increase your safety. Okay, so let's now move into a discussion of the defensible space zones around your house. And we're going to start at that next step after you've hardened your home. You move into working in your defensible space, and you want to start in the 0 to 5 foot zone, which is called the Ember defense zone. So the objective is this zone, again, if I haven't drilled it in enough, is to reduce the chance of windblown embers from a fire landing near the home and igniting combustible debris or materials, thus exposing the home to flames. So this zone is closest to the house, obviously, so it requires the most careful selection and management of vegetation and other possible fuels. So this is really counter to what we've traditionally done in our landscapes. Classically, we've massed shrubs against the house, foundation shrubs. So it's really a big shift away from how we have designed our landscapes and how we need to think moving forward into the future. But we really need to look at the plant materials in this zone and think about how that might generate fuel for fire in immediate proximity to our house. So this is a relatively newer zone introduced into the defensible space recommendations when our Resilient Landscapes Coalition came together to start developing this content. We really had a hard time finding graphics that even showed the 0 to 5 foot zone. But happily, it's being much more widely adopted. I want to stress, stress that this is based on scientific research. So Dr. Stephen Quarles, who was with the University of California and moved to doing research with the Insurance Institute of Business, Home and Safety, led this study. He's now back with the university. Very happy that we have direct access to him to help us with questions and guidance. There's really some great videos online showing them doing testing in the lab, showing the risk to a home resulting from embers. Want to stress that where possible, you want to remove combustible materials, that fuel, from this zone. Use non-flammable mulches such as gravel or stone around that perimeter. Remove any natural fiber doormats, and certainly, as we discussed before, remove or replace any flammable fencing material that attaches to the home. So this is the ideal. Again, all of us are going to need to do the best we can as we adapt to this. April's going to have some great pictures at the latter part of the presentation to help depict some more visions and ideas for you to accomplish this. So I did want to highlight, I mentioned earlier that we talked to Paul before this workshop, and there is a City of Santa Rosa code for those of you who are Santa Rosa residents, a new code that requires for sprinklered construction that there be a non-flammable zone in the 0 to 3 foot perimeter around that structure, and in unsprinklered construction that it be a 0 to 5 foot non-flammable zone. So I just wanted to highlight that City of Santa Rosa code requirement for you. Okay, so as we've talked about, during a wildfire, thousands of embers can rain down on roofs and pelt the side of homes like hails during a storm. And if those embers become lodged in something easily ignited on or near a house, the home is in jeopardy of burning. I want to really stress this point. We are not saying that all existing trees must be removed around your home, but you really need to consider placement and especially regular maintenance of your trees. And if a tree is close to the house, you need to make sure you're regularly cleaning the roof of debris during fire season. So it is a county code requirement to remove any dead branches and limb up existing tree limbs. The biggest risk of having a tree limb over the roof of your home is the debris that it will drop on the roof and the maintenance that then you are going to be required to do, especially during red flag days. There are recommendations that you should keep limbs 6 feet above the roof. And again, that roof litter maintenance is critical. And it is a county code requirement to cut tree limbs within 10 feet of a stovepipe or a chimney outlet. And then, of course, maintain them year round. Okay, we also wanted to highlight maintenance that you need to be doing on an ongoing basis in this all critical Ember defense zone. It's county code requirement to clean up and dispose of leaves, pine needles, and other plant litter. Also county code requirement to remove debris from roofs and gutters. And to keep climbing vines, they have to be free of dead or dying material in actually the 0 to 30 foot zone. So 0 to 5 fits in the zone, which is why we included them. Or they should be removed from any trees or structures. Okay, let's move on to our next zone, which is zone 1, or the 5 to 30 foot home defense zone, also known as the lean, clean, and green zone. Not so easy for me to say. And you really need to think about this zone as if fire is threatening your home, that this is where firefighters are going to make a stand to defend your home. So the recommendation in zone 1, this 5 to 30 foot zone, is to plant in islands of planting separated by hardscape. And optimally, you want to select low ground cover, such as a mown native grass, herbaceous perennials, or succulents. Those are really your optimal selections for plant materials. And this is a really great zone for incorporating in hardscape elements. So where it's where many of us are enjoying our landscape directly outside of our homes anyways. So it's a great place for a water feature, a brick patio or paving stones, dry creek bed, boulders. There's lots of options to consider for incorporating more hardscape into this zone around our homes. But we do want to keep in mind those CAL FIRE spacing guidelines shared before. So you can include shrubs and trees or small shrub or tree groupings if you're keeping them regularly pruned, properly irrigated, right? So in maximal health, and keeping them horizontally separated from other groupings of shrubs or trees. We like to suggest that you actually consider the use of a specimen or individual shrub or tree in this zone. But we want to make sure that you understand that you can include groupings of shrubs and trees in the 5 to 30 foot zones. Again, you want to make sure you're watering the plants to maintain their health and regularly maintaining any dead and dry material. And it is a county code requirement to move wood piles to 30 feet from buildings or to cover them with fire resistant tarps, and then to clear surrounding vegetation around the wood pile. And of course, we want to remember to avoid ladder fuels everywhere, but particularly in the zone this close to your home. Remove dead material and lower tree branches, limb trees up to 6 feet, and make sure you're optimizing the health of all the plants in this zone. Okay, let's move now to zone 2, which is the reduced fuel zone. And the objective of this reduced fuel zone is to create and maintain a landscape that, if ignited, will not readily transmit fire to the home. So in this zone, we really have the same basic principles as zone 1, but you can include some larger shrubs and trees in widely spaced groups. But you want to continue the focus on creating, where you can, islands of vegetation that are separated by hardscape. And remember, that could be in this zone, for example, some ground covers or native lawn that you're mowing could be that hardscape element that separates these island beds. And you want to, of course, continue to ensure that you have access for maintenance. You're vigilant about removing ladder fuels. And then, so wide walkways can be really particularly important here to help you separate your planting areas and to simplify your maintenance. That we talked about how important having ease of access to all these planted areas for maintaining them is. Again, optimally, gravel or brick or decomposed granite or an irrigated native mown grass strip, but wood mulch is okay in this zone. And it is a county code requirement to keep annual grasses mown to a maximum height of 4 inches. And Ellie referred to this in her presentation. You really want to make sure you're removing any invasive plants which can spread and increase the risk of fire to neighboring properties. And of course, Scotch and French brooms are really major problems here in Sonoma County. Non-native plants, as well as pampas grass and Mexican feathergrass, can also be really problematic. So once you've done the work to harden your home and prepare your defensible space, that 0 to 100 foot perimeter around your home, it's important to then reach out to and work with your neighbors. And in fact, for many of you, your 0 to 100 foot defensible space zone might extend into a neighbor's property. So you want to work together to develop a fuel reduction plan. Watch for maintenance needed, and then consider the total volume of vegetation in the area. And maybe you're seeing a view of your neighbor's roof that they don't see as readily, where you see a lot of debris accumulating on the neighbor's roof, and you can kindly suggest that you can help them maintain or remove it. Or you see unmown tall weeds, but you really want to look with a lens of what the total volume of vegetation is in your neighborhood area and whether there are any ladder fuels. Some other neighborhood considerations: look at the space between the homes to really minimize the risk. Low ground covers or rock mulches with widely spaced shrubs or trees between homes really can help minimize your risk in a fire situation. Maybe you can look at creating more biodiversity by creating habitat corridors, create more habitat connectivity between homes in your neighborhood. And there are so many COPE groups that have started up around the county, which is really wonderful, who work together as teams in fire preparedness. Hope that many of you are members of COPE teams or are familiar with COPE teams in your communities, your local communities. But I want to stress how important our local firefighters are as a resource for us for guidance as well, as evidenced by Paul joining us today in the workshop. So you also want to ensure that you and your family and firefighters have clear access in and out of the property. So you want to maintain vegetation on both sides of the roads and driveway, 10 feet from the road edge and then 15 feet vertically, and maintain 12 feet wide of unobstructed pavement for passage of vehicles. So in looking at this driveway, what would you do to make this more Firewise? Well, we've already talked about some vegetation management principles in zone 2. So you would cut the grass back to 4 inches, limb up your trees, and then ensure that you've got adequate access. That's what that 15 feet vertical aspect is for clearance of a fire truck, so they can get in to defend your property. If they drive by and they haven't got easy access to your property, they're going to move on to another property that's better prepared, where they can make a stand and defend it. If you reside in a more densely forested area, you can help control fire behavior by reducing ladder fuels, opening up the canopy of the trees, and maintaining the ground fuels. That will absolutely help the firefighters with fire suppression during a fire. And because, of course, new vegetation will regenerate in these areas, you need to re-enter those stands every few years. And, we don't have a lot of, because we have a very limited time to share some content with you, we don't have a lot of content on more forestry management practices, but there's lots of great resources and information out there that can help with that. Okay, so a 4-inch layer of mulch, like maybe more optimally in our new world, like a 2 to 3 inch layer of mulch, really helps with weed suppression and water conservation. But it's also organic and it will burn. But it's an important aspect of a sustainable and manageable landscape, because it also, of course, helps us manage the weeds. And if any of y'all are picking weeds as much as as I and some neighbors have been lately, it can really help you in that scenario. It's recommended to not use mulch in a widespread or continuous manner. And you want to separate areas that are mulched, again, with materials that are non-combustible and ignition resistant, like gravel or concrete or rock or a native grass lawn. So there is a scientific study conducted by the University of Nevada at Reno and the University of California. And they evaluated the flammability of a number of different mulch materials. And it is in Reno was the basis of the study. So they, some of the things they looked at were like pine needles, some things that may not be as relevant for many of us in Sonoma County. But in general, the least flammable of the mulches that they tested are composted or larger sized composted arbor mulch. So those are your best options to select. And no gorilla hair, that shredded bark mulch, is extremely susceptible to ignition from embers. And this upper picture is actually showing you don't do this. This is a wide expanse of mulch. That's that gorilla hair. So it's that really fibrous shredded bark mulch. It's not separated by any hardscape. It may go directly up against the fence in the house. And then it's directly adjacent and around and under these juniper hedges, which likely are unirrigated, unmaintained, and would bring the fire directly from that gorilla hair to the juniper straight up to the house. So this is I should have a red X through this that I add to the presentation. This is a don't do this picture. Again, we want to stress that you don't want to use any organic mulch within, for sure, that 0 to 5 foot perimeter of the house. And then again, you want to separate those mulched areas with non-combustible materials where you can. And really cannot hammer this point home enough that much of your success depends on your ongoing maintenance of your landscape. So throughout the year, you need to continually monitor for this type of needed maintenance, such as removing dead plants and dead branches from trees and shrubs, removing trees from, removing vines. Sorry, let me restate that again, removing vines from trees and shrubs. And then here are recommendations for maintenance annually before fire season. Ellie stressed that you want to do your pruning and vegetation thinning optimally in in fall and early winter to avoid harm to bird breeding. You want to mow those annual grasses and weeds to 4 inches tall, but you don't want to cut the grass to bare dirt. It's really important to keep viable vegetation in place for erosion control. And then you want to be particularly sensitive about dry leaf litter at the beginning of fire season. So we should probably be starting to pay attention to this as early as May or June. A lot of these items we've already covered. So just kind of a nice recap of annual considerations before fire season. And then every few years as needed, you want to look at your tree canopies and look to thin and reduce those to remove any twiggy growth and to maintain separation between the trees and reduce your overall fuel load. Again, you want to keep the lowest branches of those trees pruned up at least 6 feet from the ground. Cut back ground covers and vines to remove buildup of dry stems and leaves, and cut back shrubs to renew. So wouldn't it be easy to do all these things if you're starting from scratch? And many of you, I'm sure, have well-established, beautiful landscapes. So this is a really great graphic from East Bay Mud that shows a before maintenance picture that includes ladder fuels, there's no break in planted areas, and shrubs are massed up against the house. And here's your after picture where you've got islands of vegetation. There's been thinning and pruning of the taller vegetation, right? You've limbed up that tree to at least 6 feet above the ground. It's been branches pruned and removed from around the chimney outlet. Those foundation shrubs against the house removed. So hopefully it starts to give you some vision of how you can move from a densely vegetated, unmaintained landscape to something that's more fire ready.
Mimi, here's just your 5-minute warning. Thanks so
Okay,
much.
great. Thanks, Thomas. I'm almost done. That's perfect timing. So I also want to share this additional East Bay Mud graphic, which is a really great illustration of recommended tree maintenance, which is really key to fire resistance. So you just need to be keeping a lens to thinking about the fuel load on your property. So I also wanted to stress, I saw a question in the Q&A that for those of you in suburban neighborhoods, maybe all you have is a 0 to 30 foot perimeter that's your garden around your home. So in many cases, a fire coming into that community is going to be a house-to-house burn, but still feel that it's incredibly important to introduce these same principles we've talked about, because in many cases we know that it could be embers a mile in advance of a fire front that are coming into the neighborhood to threaten our homes. But it's really important to then create community groups to look at your broader fire defensibility as a group. So I just wanted to recap. I threw a lot of information at you guys in about 40 minutes. Some key takeaways: to choose fire resistant landscape materials, to arrange your landscape plants with spacing to disrupt a fire. Of course, optimally, we hope that you'll select some native plants to help support the biodiversity. You want to maintain your landscape features, keep your plants well irrigated, healthy, and well pruned. I think I've said this many times: to remove any dead or dying shrubs, trees, or branches. You want to avoid planting close to structures, especially near vents, under windows, or exposed eaves. And of course, you want to be managing pruning up tree limbs at least 6 feet and not creating any ladder fuels. And then in that defensible space zone that we've talked about today, in 0 to 5, use inorganic materials such as gravel or stepping stones, and remove any flammable fencing materials attached to the house. In the next zone, the 5 to 30 foot zone, plant an island separated by hardscape, and optimally choose low herbaceous perennials, grasses, or succulents, and perhaps specimen or individual shrubs or trees. And in that 30 to 100 foot zone, same basic principles, but you can include shrub and tree groups in more widely spaced groups. So I hope I've given you a basic framework for starting to evaluate your landscape in the 0 to 100 foot defensible space zone around your home. April's going to take you into some more detail with some beautiful pictures of design based on these different zones and native plant selection to support biodiversity. But we all our members of our coalition truly believe that a Firewise and sustainable landscape is possible that incorporates beauty, safety, and privacy, saves water, and supports wildlife. But again, plant placement and design are key. Maintenance is essential, and start at your house, harden your home, and then start working out. And if you can, bite the bullet and implement that 0 to 5 foot non-combustible zone. And last slide, Thomas, I promise. We've got some great resources through the University of California on home landscaping for fire, home hardening, and that mulch combustibility study that I referenced. And I'm sure Cleo will put links in the document we'll share with you to our UC Master Gardener program of Sonoma County website for links to these publications and lots more resources. So that's the end of my presentation. April is next, and we usually like to do a little 5-minute transition. You guys have been sitting for an hour and 15 minutes listening to us yammer at you. So if you want to get up and stretch, and if there's any Q&A that we want to directly respond to before we move into April's presentation, we can do it.
Yeah, that would be perfect. Thank you so much, Mimi.
Oh.
So there's some good questions in the Q&A. So I'll just go ahead and read those off while people stretch. Stretching is very, very important. And then I'll hand it over to April. So the first question is for oak trees. Any advice on growing these in an urban garden setting? We have a very young oak, around 6 to 8 years in our backyard. I'm worried it needs too much open space than is available in our yard, given that we're planning to put in more landscape plants around it.
April, do you want to speak to that? Oh, you're muted, I think.
There you go. It's a touchy subject. I think it depends on like how tight of an urban space you're in. But oak trees, as Ellie was talking about, or maybe you didn't have that slide this time, Ellie, about the amazing biodiversity that California native live oak adds to your landscape and your whole neighborhood. So even if it feels like a small yard, I think it's worth it to try to bring that into your ecosystem and your landscape. There's a lot of great plants that can, and I'll talk about that more in my talk, but there's a lot of great plants that you can use under oaks to keep that habitat and incorporate it. Paul, maybe you had a comment about oaks in the urban landscape?
Yeah, no, I mean, April covered it, but yeah, we have had a lot of concerns specifically in Santa Rosa following not only the Tubbs fire, but the Glass fire and the Nuns fire. We've had a lot of residents that lack some of the resources and education and want to just quickly remove everything. And that kind of speaks to what, Mimi's concerns were earlier on the over clearing. The oaks, they definitely provide benefits. We have seen the lack of oaks and what that has done to parts of Fountain Grove, where that over clearing, if you think about it, and by removing those oaks kind of does change the ecology. And so we are seeing where we once had oak woodlands now replaced with Scotch broom, and that is far worse than the oaks were. So definitely continue to use these resources, and just because you have an oak up against your structure doesn't necessarily mean it's a bad thing.
Thank you. Paul.
Yeah, and I just wanted to add that some of the slides, especially the diagrams, can be a little confusing if we're saying don't plant under trees. Obviously, if you have a good sized tree, it's fine to put, like those coral bells I showed you, or plants that are maybe 3 feet tall, and then you just, the bigger trees, you can limb them up much higher. But the thing is, you have to imagine that if the lower plant caught fire, how tall would the flame length? And that's why they say 3 feet, 3 times the height of the underlying plant. But there are a lot of plants that, and April can talk about them, that you can plant under oaks. And you remember that slide that I had, maybe it had that beautiful green with white flowers. That's the coral bells with a white flower. So yeah, please, the oaks are tremendous. They provide, they can shade your house and cut down on your electric bills.
And also the live oaks, we're finding that as long as you manage the leaf litter, they're actually kind of resistant to fire, and as long as they're hydrated. And so there's some real dynamic happening in that space with a well-maintained oak tree.
There was a question about oak leaf litter, and I answered it in the Q&A, but the question was, what about the oak leaf? Where can you have it? Where is it okay to have it when you're in the defensible space zone? And it's definitely a good idea to keep it out of the 0 to 5. But of course, if it's raining, if you're in the middle of winter, that's actually the optimal time for the chemicals, the oak leaf litter, which becomes organic mulch to actually infiltrate into the soil. So then if you rake it back in the summertime and kind of keep it out of the 0 to 5, certainly, and then in the 5 to 30 zone, and we've talked about this with a number of different groups. Some people are actually doing controlled burns in areas, and they'll actually stop the fire when there's just an inch of leaf litter left. So you can think of it as actually mulch in the 5 to 30, as long as you don't let it get too deep, and it's actually composted.
Well hydrated. Back to that well hydrated.
And well hydrated, yeah.
With regard to the oak trees, real quick, I want to throw in before we get away from that. Just remember, I think it was April or Ellie that did say, we're talking about healthy oak trees. Mm-hmm. So don't go thinking that, oh, they said oak trees are fine. If you've got an oak tree that needs to be pruned, if it's full of dead wood, then that's not healthy. You need to do something about it. And that could be a hazard. But if you've got a healthy oak tree that's green and lively, then that's a different story.
Hey, thanks so much, everybody, for obviously oaks are near and dear to a lot of people's
talk about
hearts.
this all night, yeah.
Yes, exactly. Quick clarification, Mimi, I think this is for you or for Paul. Are you talking about sprinkler systems inside or outside the house when you mentioned that?
Yeah, so that was inside the house, and I don't know, Paul, and I know we need to move to April's presentation, but I was wondering if we could have Paul briefly speak to that those zone requirements with sprinkler and non-sprinklered construction. And also, Paul, can you speak quickly to whether county codes apply to Santa Rosa City? And I do want to say, I shared them as kind of best practices and guidelines because they do apply to anyone who's a non-municipality resident. But Paul, if you could speak to that quickly, and then we could move to April's presentation, that would be awesome.
Yeah, no problem. So we do have a new code in place for new construction, and it is if the new construction is provided with interior fire sprinkler system, we are requiring 3 feet of non-combustible landscape around the structure. If the structure is unsprinklered, no interior fire sprinklers, it is requiring 5 feet. So the first question we get is, what would be unsprinklered? There are exemptions for accessory dwelling units and other accessory structures that may not have fire sprinklers. So those require 5 feet of clearance for new construction. The second clarification on county code versus city code. It's a touchy subject. I'm going to try and dance around a little bit. So the county is utilizing government code. We're all kind of required to comply with government code. However, the city of Santa Rosa is working on a comprehensive vegetation management code. Our goal is to roll out a code that we intend to enforce, but we want to get the community to understand it through education, through inspection, and then ultimately enforcement. So in the county, it's, and they are correct. And again, I'm kind of dancing around a little bit. There's certain things that are somewhat easy to say. However, when you're in a rural setting, it's hard to tell whether or not that property is compliant or not compliant. The city really does intend on rolling out code requirements for our wildland urban interface. However, again, before we officially launch them, we're going to work on a comprehensive vegetation management guidance document that will really clarify what people need to do so that we get complaints about it, it's actually enforceable. So more will be coming. That information will be on our website, which we'll stick up there, the srcity.org/WUI. But we will be rocking and rolling on requirements, and we're in the process of hiring additional staff right now to help with that educational component, where you'll actually be able to have fire department staff in the field answering questions and helping clarify some of this stuff.
Wonderful. Thanks so much, Paul. Again, very glad you could make it tonight. Okay, let's go to April. We'll do some more questions after April's presentation.
Wonderful. And I hope everybody got up and wiggled around a little bit. I'm standing up. I know it's hard to sit for a long time. Is this showing up as a full screen
Can you
situation?
put it in presenter mode and present so it expands?
There we go.
Thanks.
All right. Is that right? Is it good, Ellie?
That looks good.
Okay, so I know we've had a lot of material here, and Mimi really has gives the breadth of the codes and everything, and Ellie set the scene of what we're after, and I get the delightful part of the workshop where I get to show you pictures, and I wish we were in person and people could just ask questions, and that'll happen again, because I know this is more of a dialogue, my part of the workshop, but we can't really have that right now. So hold your questions. I have a few questions I'm going to try to address that were asked. So, so we are creating this collaboration has been like Ellie said, it's like a master's PhD in resilient landscaping. I've learned so much. We've all done this for a long time, and I feel like I'm just newly back in school learning what works and what. So I look back on all of my designs that I've done over the last 20 years working with natives, and I'm like, oh my gosh, I had foundation shrubs and everything was right up against the house. And I was trained in landscape architecture school to have foundation planting, and then you have this ugly foundation that architects are having to shift their work as well to change their foundation so that we don't have to hide them with plants. So there's this huge learning curve happening. But I am the executive director of the Habitat Corridor Project, and I also serve for much longer than I've been with the Habitat Corridor Project as the horticulture chair for the California Native Plant Society, the Milo Baker chapter. And I give a lot of tips during this workshop, but my biggest tip would be to join the California Native Plant Society. There's so much to learn. If you're interested in biodiversity and native plants, there's a lot of staffing coming on, and they are working, Native Plant Society is really in this area deeply, looking at Firefly followers, and it's just really exciting to see other agencies engaging in this topic that we've been talking about for the last 3 years, maybe, and Ellie and I, and it's exciting to see other agencies catch on. But the Habitat Corridor Project, our mission is to create and promote native plant restoration gardens in the urban environment. So for this workshop in the city of Santa Rosa, I changed these for each area that we speak to, but I'm really picturing, I know we have a lot of Sebastopol and Petaluma and like a wide range of people joining this workshop, but I edited it down to think of more urban landscapes and those people in town with smaller landscapes and how we're going to relate to our neighbors and pick up, you know, less expensive, maybe not these giant landscapes. So I'm trying to show you guys what you can do in a smaller lot. So resilient landscapes, we came up with this idea because we wanted to not just address fire. Like everybody was fire, 2017, fire, fire, fire. But before that was drought. And then before that was development and losing biodiversity. And so we're really trying to bring us all together into this systems thinking model where we think we're not just reacting, right? Because like last year and the year before, we got some rain. And so people were putting in lawn again after the fires. And that's not the way we need to address life in Sonoma County. We need to know that every 5 years we hit a drought, you know, time. And, you know, I hate to see these programs that we set up, you know, $1 billion programs to replace lawns. And then they get dropped when the governor says we're not in a drought anymore. And so we need to remember where we are and that it's not just fire, it's not just drought. And it's the most important thing to me is biodiversity. But so the definition of resilient is capable of withstanding shock and without permanent definite deformation or rupture. And I think that that's kind of where we're at. Like after COVID, we're still like we did one workshop without Zoom, and then now we're in the Zoom world, and I was like, no Zoom, and here we are in Zoom, and I'm loving it. And I hope that my puppy doesn't completely sidetrack me here because I'm on my own with a little dog tonight, but I think she's going to be good. So biodiversity equals redundancy. So we need to make sure that we are addressing this in our work, in our landscapes. Even in small landscapes, we can have multiple plants, you know, different species of plants. And you know, Ellie spoke about Douglas Taleny in his book, Bringing Back Nature. But it's really it's a thought process around redundancy and making sure that we are having multiple levels of life in our gardens. So I learned to do this and learned about these plants by hiking in nature. And I have just rediscovered, it used to be like a Sierra Nevada snob. Like I would spend the summers up in the Sierras and looking at wildflowers. And I have just discovered Sonoma County's amazing hikes and nature. So, you know, just when you're out and about, you're like, oh, there's this plant. Oh, I can get that at the nursery. So just really like starting to learn slowly and understanding what we have around us in Sonoma County. You know, sustainability is all about creating, you know, saving what we have for our future generations. It's super important. And my feeling around sustainability is that you can design in sustainability. You can think about all of these ways to sink water into your site, to create biodiversity, to lose your lawn. And design is a key piece in that. So I'm going to talk a little bit in this talk about a project that I worked on with the city of Santa Rosa and Sonoma Water called the Living Learning Landscapes. And it's along the SRJC campus, and it's livinglearninglandscapes.com. And I will refer to it quite a bit, but there's a couple of demonstration gardens already in, and then we have more coming online. I think it's important when you're trying to learn about native plants in these landscapes to have a place to go to see them. So you can get started at some of these landscapes. Like I usually show all these really pretty pictures from my landscape architecture firm, and I will. And I'll show some amazing things you can do, but there's also really small things you can do in your landscape to really make them beautiful and Firewise. So Mimi already went over the 0 to 5, and I'm just like backing her up with decorative, you know, some of the things that you can have in that space. So in the 0 to 5, we're looking at decorative, you know, like decorative rock, well hydrated plants, I have a lot of clients that really enjoy their containers with annuals and non-natives. So I'm always like, put them in a pot. Like they get tired of me like saying that, like, don't put them in the ground, put them in a pot. So a lot of times we'll use, you know, annuals and containers that can be better hydrated. This picture up here on the right is a good example of just a lot of different options that you can have in the 0 to 5. Those are well tended, well hydrated plants along the base of the house. This site, and now I would put, we've taken out the mulch and put in some rock mulch along the base of the house. I'll catch myself in a lot of these pictures editing. On the left here is, you know, just creating in a small garden. You can create like a little patio area in that 0 to 5, 0 to 10-ish space. You know, you get to hang out with some little outcroppings of plantings. This is a rebuild in Fountain Grove, but we really enjoyed seeing how the use of this, you know, under decks can be a really dangerous place in the 0 to 5, where a lot of times we store all of our junk under there and end up with a lot of leaves. And so this client is actually going to retrofit this additionally with a smaller gauge wire under the deck. But under that, you can't see it, but it's all drain rock underneath there. So there's no leaf litter, nothing. And then having that 0 to 5, it's like a mixture of some inexpensive drain rock and some prettier crushed Trinity rock with some nice ground cover plantings, and then edited out from the home in the 0 to 5. Thank you, Ellie, for this photo. I think this is wonderful. Like, why not have your pathways here and some, you know, some nice rockscapes and some creative use of that 0 to 5. Another decks, you know, come up a lot for us. This is it's called Nomo Fescue. It's the bent grass mix. So it's a Delta bluegrass product that's a lower water use, turf kind of, you know, you can mow it, and it doesn't need irrigation all that much. This is my puppy in the foreground here. You know, it's a great way to use that 0 to 5 for a play space like that. You can play croquet here. You can, you know, hang out and have a lawn, but it's not a high water use lawn. And I love it when you just let it grow out longer and it feels more like a meadow. And then in this landscape, we use just a low wall along it, so there's multi-level breaks for fire. And this is a rebuild. This is not a rebuild. This was a landscape that survived the 2017 fires, but the landscape burned, but the house survived. So we've been retrofitting it up in the Bennett Ridge area. Mimi showed this picture from another angle, and I thought I'd point out to you something that Ben, the fire official, the other day talked to me about. Like, so they have their you can't forget, like, you do this 0 to 5, but then you end up storing your barbecue and your recycling or your cute wine barrel for parties. And so make sure that during the fire season, this house almost burned again last year, to make sure to like keeping vigilant about these spaces. Like, although we're trying, you know, they're beautiful and we're trying to do the right thing, like, you know, we don't want embers to end up landing on the barbecue. Another fun way to use this space is just with you can add a little bit of, like, this is where we get to wriggle a little. I'm always like the fun one that gets to be like 0 to 5, gets a little bit of plants. So, you know, there's some succulents that you can fit in there with some rock mulch and boulders. Even Caroleone Stafford said that this picture on the left, you know, with the flagstone and a little bit of the Steinmondia, which is not native, but it's really well behaved in a low growing ground cover. We'll try to get everybody a plant list. We haven't completely gotten that together, but I think we really need to try to get, like, not a plant list for fire safety, but a plant list that I'm chatting about in here. And then, you know, swales and rock features around the home, depending on how big your home is, just make sure you're draining away from the home. But this is a pathway that is a swale. So we just did like a French drain underneath and then made a pathway on top. So you're sinking water in a bit, but you're also moving it away. in creating a beautiful space, and then a more decorative swale along that 0 to 5 or 0 to probably 8, kind of tending towards that these days. And plant material, back again, well hydrated. So these are native plants that are easy. Oh, they are easier to hydrate because they are adapted to drought. But in that 0 to 5, you don't want a lot of plants, but there are some native plants that you can dabble around or put in pots and get some of that softness, like yerba buena, Douglas iris. And again, Ellie talked a lot about the alum root, which I love and use a lot. It can be really easily hydrated and kind of just speckle it in so it doesn't feel like a lot of people really push back on the 0 to 5, and I think that it's changing a lot, like Mimi said, but it's nice to be able to have a few plants that you can dabble around. And then there's the issue of trees like over the home, and I know that we've had many discussions about this, and this house actually survived the Kincaid fire. There's a house under there that was their great grandfather's home out in Geyserville, and they had hired me right before the fire to kind of give them some advice. So they were doing some things that I don't think that Paul or any fire official would recommend, which is they had a well, cisterns on a well, and so they were running irrigation during the fire, like to keep, to hydrate, and they stayed until 2 in the morning, and the fire was coming in, and I was like, oh my God, I can't believe you stayed. But they were vigilant about clearing the roof and keeping the leaves away, keeping the leaf litter down and hydrating it so much. So I really think that was a big reason that the house survived. But I want to just try to speak to, for just a moment with Paul, about keeping, and Roberta maybe, about keeping these heritage oaks, and again, a little bit more about when you save them and what you need to do when you live under an oak tree. Paul, do you have a comment?
Yeah, sorry about that.
No, it's fine.
To see if Roberta was
I don't feel like I can speak to this. I know that this house survived and the fire wrapped around it, but I want people to keep their oaks, and I know a lot of us live under oaks. I live under redwood trees, and so it's just a tough situation.
Yeah, and I know Roberta as she and I work together often. I'm also a board member on Fire Safe Sonoma, so this is a topic that comes up a lot. We have had a number of requests from residents following the Tubbs fire to potentially remove heritage oaks. It does require special circumstances, and there is an approval process for it in the city. However, it's not always necessary. There are cases where the oak is unhealthy. It's growing immediately up against the structure and causing other issues, where we have allowed for their removal on a case-by-case basis. But a majority of the time they're healthy, they're fine, as long as you're dealing with the litter, which is the bigger issue, especially what we saw during the glass fire most recently, is that was kind of the silent killer, really, was the litter in a lot of those homes along the Highway 12 corridor in Oakmont were actually susceptible to that. So they had done a lot of really good work. They'd done their clearances, their 0 to 100. However, their weakness was the leaf litter in the gutters, and that's where we're seeing a lot of the fire starting. So again,
I really appreciate that. Yeah.
Yeah, I actually, when we built our house, we angled it to sit between a bunch of oak trees to save the oak trees. And with that comes the maintenance that was just described. So at least more than once a year, and it's a 2-story house where I live, so more than once a year, we got to get up there and clean that stuff out of the gutters, because that, as Paul said, that's the weak link there.
Mm-hmm.
And then the other weak link is if you have an unhealthy oak tree, then you really got to limit up and get the dead wood out of there. Now, with that said, the other thing to keep in mind, that given you have a healthy oak tree right up against the house or over your roof, and given that you're staying on top of the litter on the ground and on the roof and in the gutters, keeping that clean, you still want to have your defensible space envelope. So I would consider thinking of that oak tree as part of your house and extending your defensible space out beyond the mature diameter.
Okay,
of-
so beyond the leaf litter zone, the
Yeah.
drip zone. Okay, that's really wonderful to consider. Thank you both. So so that was 0 to 5 quickly, and there's just so many options, and you'll see some more in here when we hit 5 to 30. But 5 to 30 in an urban environment, this is in Santa Rosa near the Memorial Hospital. 5 to 30 is almost to your neighbors, right? So driveways and this is a court, and sidewalks can come into this thought process. Like, we did this garden, and if you see across the street, they sheet mulch and they put in natives right across the street. So you're really, once you start and take out your lawn, we're entering another drought, like, get it out of here, and you can really enjoy the biodiversity and get your neighbors all excited. Paths and separation, like Mimi was saying, and islands of plants. This is kind of a larger yard, but you don't need a giant yard to have a grouping of a few monkey flower and a few buckwheat, and then some paths in between. This is another garden. If you go to my website, habitatcorridorproject.org, there's a few places that you can go and actually see these plants, which I think is super important. So this is our newest landscape here on the left, Ferris Meadow. It's a demonstration garden. We use the sidewalk as
April, we can't hear you if you need to get a little closer.
Sorry.
Thanks.
We use the sidewalk as a break between these two, what I consider biodiversity islands. So you can see that you can use your extended landscape in that world. And then driveways and sidewalks and pathways and parking. So this is kind of another way. It was a newer garden that we had a parking space and added some plants. A great tip to use is drain rock. It's beautiful pathway material, and it's only about $40 a yard. So you can use this in your wider space, in between those islands. I use it a lot in landscapes. This is downtown Santa Rosa at our other Living Learning Landscapes site. And I encourage you to go on down there. So we created swales. We tried to dig them out and we couldn't, because there were all these old oak trees that had been pushed, like, little oaks had been growing for all the years. And so we couldn't actually dig out. So we built it up. We created a swale, kind of a rain garden swale. I call it a butterfly and hummingbird swale. And so you can go visit this. This garden is already in, and really a beautiful landscape. And we worked with master gardeners on this project, and it will be really fabulous by the end of the year, and a place for people to go. And you can download free plans online, which is amazing, with like expert designed irrigation by the Sonoma Water Agency and City of Santa Rosa. And so you can pick out even right now, you can see all the gardens, download the one you like, and install them to replace your typical kind of front yard space. 5 minutes. Rain gardens. We don't need to talk about that right now. I wanted to talk about this. I was walking this morning. I'm sorry, I changed these all around this morning, but I looked at this landscape in my neighborhood, and I think this is kind of a typical, like rebate program lawn replacement. They put in a bunch of boxwood, and then they put a bunch of.
April, can you get a little closer? Sorry, it's hard to hear you.
Sorry. Yeah. Let me just up my. Oh yeah.
Happy 2020 and 2021, everybody. This is how we do things now.
Oh yeah, I'm so glad. Let me up that. And then and let me go back into, can you still see it in presentation mode?
No, it went out of presentation mode.
There you go. So I was thinking, this landscape is a perfect example of somebody that might have just gotten the rebate and put in a bunch of rocks and some sad, I hope nobody's garden, this is not anybody's garden, because there's nothing wrong with it. I was just thinking that in the middle of this, there could be an opportunity for a biodiversity island. Like, you could add a little swath of plants in there, or a couple of manzanita, or just to bring in a little wildlife. So, and then down here, these neighbors had created a catio. So cats are really really damaging to the environment. And so I walked by and this just went in, and the cats were out there and they weren't eating the birds, but there's a little patio and they were just hanging out there. So there's just ways that like small landscapes can really save, really help with our biodiversity. And larger islands with space in between, we'll just kind of go through some of these pretty plants. And then this biodiversity islands idea, like this is a combination that I lean on, and I've leaned on over the years, and I can promise most people that this combination will be applicable to pretty much all of Sonoma County gardens, from especially in Santa Rosa. So and we're back to the larger landscape, looking at rock walls and big islands. So there's space to create these biodiversity islands, and they can be bigger or smaller. And what to do between the masses of plants. So I added hydrate on red flag days while Mimi was talking, because I realized that arbor mulch, 2 inches or less, is important, but it's also important that it's hydrated and it's not. And for even plant health and soil health, you need to hydrate in between your plants. I think Mimi talked about a lot of this. Mowed California native bunch grasses or well-maintained ground covers. Tips for, let me go back one. So successful habitat gardening, there's just a few things. Like, it's really about big groupings. So like if you can do 3 instead of 1 plant that you fall in love with at the nursery in the native plant zone, flowering at different times, and plants that provide both nectar and pollen sources. Irrigation is a big topic. Again, at the Living Learning Landscapes, you can see how we did a grid of drip irrigation. And also there's some other options for irrigation that I'm not going to talk about tonight because we're working with the city of Santa Rosa. I don't want to upset Thomas. And then wait for the delight. Like, this is the best thing that I thought of the other day. Like, this is in my garden, and I garden, I don't garden a lot because this is my job. And I've planted some things. I live, in a redwood understory kind of in Sebastopol. And it was so exciting. After 3 years of waiting for this beautiful plant, my red bud finally bloomed. So you need to give natives a little time. It's okay to wait. You're like, why isn't it growing? But they're putting all this energy into their roots. And then all of a sudden, after 2 or 3 years, you get this delightful overstory from them spending that time in their understory. And that's why they're so drought tolerant, because their roots are 3 times larger than their top. So there's a lot of plant communities that we use a lot, or I use a lot, and I recommend, like the sages, some ground covers, the buckwheats and California fuchsias. And here is when I like to talk a little bit about, just make sure, like Mimi said, like, make sure you know the plant you're buying, because one plant can be a ground cover and a giant, 3-foot tall shrub. So you just really need to understand the plant you're buying. And there's all kinds of cultivars and selections that we've made up or we found out in nature. So there's ground covers and larger shrubs of most natives. Using your shrubs, like leaning on shrubs, making sure you use some in all these zones. Like Mimi said, like a single shrub in the 5 to 30, and then the larger masses in the 30 to 100. And there's just a ton of amazing native shrubs. I lean heavily on this California coffeeberry, Mount San Bruno, which is a selection that's tidier, less. The leaves are more hydrated. It feels, and it doesn't get so much leaf litter and buildup. Coyote Brush, I know this is a plant that there's a lot of dialogue around in landscape. It is one plant that is a ground cover and a shrub, and also can tolerate a ton of pruning. So to reinvigorate it, it can be cut back to the ground, and then it comes back, fluffy and less fire. I don't know, or more Firewise. I don't know what the best term was for that. And then native trees. I left this out before, but like remember our oaks and our buckeyes and all of our trees. Like we have a bunch of amazing trees. Buckeyes are, I put a link in the docs that you all get about how much biodiversity is on one single buckeye, California buckeye tree with pollinators. So it's just amazing what they can offer. And same with the California live oaks. And I'm going to end with why use California native plants. I usually start with that, but why not? You know, and my biggest why is because it's so fun to enjoy your garden in a whole different way. Like the plants are pretty and you can create this gorgeous landscape, but then when you're in a California native garden, you get bumblebees and hummingbirds and butterflies flickering through. So you really get this whole nother level of landscape that you're adding to your garden. Thank you all for listening. I always end up having to rush at the end, but I want to make sure that we have questions answered. And this is my son when he was super cute, like 3 years old on the landscape. But our future, it's really important. We can plant these plants and really, really help biodiversity. And it's not just the monarchs, it's all of the pollinators that we need to help support. And you'll get a document with all of our websites. Thank you.
Thank you so much, April.
Of course.
Always great to hear you speak, along with everybody else. Got some questions coming up in the Q&A. A lot of them have been answered by typing. Thank you, panelists. Wendy said that she'd read that some evergreen shrubs and trees with dense waxy leaves can actually protect a building from ignition by shielding wood from embers. Anybody want to take that one?
I'll start and then maybe Paul could help out as well. We've talked about this a couple of times because we've heard this kind of referred to. I'm not aware of any scientific studies that support this, so I want to make that statement up front. There are some characteristics that are kind of considered that might make a plant more fire prone, and what might make a plant less fire prone would be these dense kind of moisture retaining leaves. But again, I also want to stress that there isn't any consensus within the scientific community about how to test for that fire resistance or flammability. So it's really, I think, a critical area that hopefully we'll have a lot more research as we move forward into the future.
That's why I dance around like the coffee berry and the more fleshy leaves, but we don't have science around that.
So for sure I wouldn't have it in the 0 to 5 foot. So but I don't know if Paul, if you want to speak to that question, if you have any other thoughts or comments on that one, that's a tough one.
I was actually answering a question in the box about the salvage covers. Sorry.
Oh. It was, did you catch it? It was about Wendy's heard that evergreen trees and shrubs with dense waxy leaves can actually protect a building from ignition by shielding the wood from embers.
Not enough to speak to it.
Yeah. So Wendy, hopefully, thanks for the question, because it's really thought-provoking. It's absolutely something we've talked about, but there's no research yet that's
something that I've been really trying to look into with oaks as well, with live oaks, but I haven't been able to find answers.
I mean, conceptually, it makes sense, especially if you're keeping, I mean, you really want to focus and you want to look at your plants at a different lens. You want to make sure you're keeping any dead material from accumulating within the center of that tree. You want to reduce the risk, that an ember might fly through there. I mean, they're so tiny. I don't think you're going to have a density of waxy leaves that's going to prevent any embers from getting in there. So if they do, you want to make sure there's not of like dead built up leaves and material that will ignite that ember and then spread the fire further. So great question. Hopefully we'll get some more scientific research that supports that moving ahead in the future.
I also just want to mention that that you'll see on some fire prone plant characteristic lists that waxy leaves can also be fire prone. So I think that the point is that those lists really aren't, you'll see one plant on a bad plant list, and then the next list you see it will be the good plant list. So I think the reason that people sometimes think that an oak canopy or any tree canopy can protect the house is that theoretically embers might land in it and then just go out rather than landing on your roof in the duff on your roof. So there's a lot of anecdotal information out there, but it's not scientifically shown.
Yeah, and I think we really you have to have the lens to what else have you been doing around the property to maintain it, to make it fire ready?
There was one question that I forgot to answer during my talk that I thought was super important about leaving room for habitat. I think when we mow, I have a client in Sebastopol who just said that they are all of a sudden have weasels on their landscape and they're eating the gophers. And they wanted to know if they should mow down their whole lawn or leave like a little room for the weasels, which is so exciting here in Sebastopol to stay. And so I left that out of my talk, but like there's a really important way to leave a little bit of messiness in your landscape, and especially in the 30 to 100 space, so that we can have that coming in.
And then to add to that, I know that Mimi had the 4 inches of grasses cut in the county. The city has that too. That's during fire season, which typically runs.
Fire season.
Yeah, we do understand that concern. We do hear that often in the city. So on larger parcels that are 5+ acres, we don't require the full abatement of the property. We just require the perimeter of it to be cut 30 feet. And then you can break them up into 2.5 acre sections. So it allows for that natural habitat and allows us to do what we need to do and actually physically stop the fire and once it kind of runs out of that fuel. So we've watched it actually work where we've had fires that have burned through the large uncut grass hot and quick. And then as soon as it hits that 30-foot ring, it dies down pretty quick and allows us to contain it easily.
That's fantastic, Paul. Thank you so much for saying that.
That is great. Thanks. So we're not going to be able to get through all the questions, but I want people to, we've got a couple more, hopefully just 1 or 2. There is a link to all of the links in the chat. So please look at that link in the chat to a PDF document. There's a question, I just can't not ask this question about weeds. It's near and dear to my heart. Please talk to me about weeds and what to do with them and whatnot.
I was sure it was going to be the drip irrigation question.
I know.
Those are my top 2.
I was sure it was going to be that question.
Answer them both.
Well,
what is the weed question? Like,
yeah,
do you leave them? Do you take them out?
How to start tackling that one with a minute.
It's a question about landscape fabric.
Gotcha. Okay,
if
so
you should
actually,
ever use it.
Thank you. After we did a presentation of the Northern Sonoma County Coke groups last November, and I had someone reach out and contact me after to say, okay, but I'm going to need to put weed cloth under that 0 to 5 foot gravel perimeter to keep weeds down. And isn't that flammable? So I actually reached out. This is why it's so awesome. We have direct connection to Stephen Quarles, who did that scientific study on the 0 to 5 foot Ember defense zone. And he said, yes, it's flammable, but it's likely, a couple inches down below your layer of gravel or rocks that it's going to be a minimal risk. And if it's going to be a factor, your home's under a really serious, significant threat. So, it's a tough, the whole weed cloth issue is a really tough one because it really kind of, it kills the soil, for lack of a better framing. I mean, it really doesn't allow for, it allows some water infiltration, but it really, if you pull up old weed cloth, the soil just is, looks horrible. But understand that it's an important aspect in helping people reduce their maintenance, which is important. Know that even with it under there in the gravel layer, weed seeds will fly in and will land in that gravel and you're going to have to weed them, but it should be easy picking. So hope that helps. There's a lot of everything in these contexts is a balancing act of considerations. And Elliot, it looks like you want to make a comment as well.
Yeah, I just actually put in the answer to that I'm experimenting with some, well, there's one thing that I love and it's called a hula hoe or a stirrup hoe. And you can get a lot of weeds really fast with that. You do not have to use your fingers. You can just get in there and it, I don't know if you know, but it's shaped like a stirrup and it's a little bit sharp down below and it's on a pole and you just scrape it back and forth and it gets right underneath and pulls up the roots. But I'm also experimenting with, natural herbicides like a vinegar salt and soap solution, and you can find them online. You have to spray them over, or, you know, you get those pump sprayers at the hardware store, and you wouldn't want to do that in your garden part, but in the 0 to 5, it's actually, you know, because you don't want to add salt and vinegar to your, you know, your planting beds. But you have to use it over and over again. It's not like Roundup.
And you know that picture I showed of my neighbor's house with the little pebble lawn, and so you could have, like, there are biodegradable landscape fabrics too that are recycled material. So I would definitely recommend. I would not use landscape fabric of any other sort, but you could cut out some islands in there so that you get that whole cycle of soil. I didn't get a chance to talk about soil and that cycle, but it's super important to have mulch touch, like the you know, air touch soil and water, and that's a really important cycle that I think you're really curious about too.
Yeah, well, unfortunately, we will not be able to solve all of life's problems right now.
I know, we could
I
talk
wish
about
that we could.
maintenance the whole night. Yeah.
But I just, if you would just stop sharing your screen, April. Sorry, we should have
Oh,
done
I'm
that
so sorry.
earlier.
So sorry.
And we'll just say good night and thank you so much for joining us, panelists. You're incredible. What a wealth of knowledge and experience. Thank you for all the questions as well. Paul, thank you for joining us. And this is going to be recorded, so you can refer people to it. And good luck, everybody, with this really important work.
This is really fun. Thanks for having us.
Thanks for
Yeah,
joining us,
thank you.
everybody. Stay safe.